Yeah, so what we're going to be talking about is how the rest of the semester's going. We're just going to be catching up on some quizzes from the lectures. We're going to be talking a bit now about the great state of Texas, because part of this class has to do with the Texas government. Even if you're not from Texas, either one of you that I'm looking at right now, neither one of you are from Texas. So you go, how is this going to affect me? Well, if you lived here, decided to stay here, it might affect you. States differ in their constitutions and their structures of government, and because of that, they'll differ in many other regards in the quality of life. And I just realized I don't have my mask on, so somebody may get mad. Probably not in this class, but anyway, with that being said, there are a lot of people moving to Texas right now. There are a lot of people moving from New York and Los Angeles. I moved from Los Angeles to Texas, and I ended up staying in Texas. Now, why would I stay here when I could live in a great, sunny, mountainous state with oceans and Hollywood where I used to work and all that? Well, there are a lot of reasons. The original reason I got here was to go to school, and I wasn't really thinking about, Texas as a place to live. I was just thinking of Texas as a place to go to school. I ended up staying, or actually I went back to LA because I kept going back to work out there. So summer would come, and I'd call up buddies if they're working on film. I'd go out there and I'd work out there during summer or during the winter breaks during the school year. And then I'd come back to Texas to do that. But then eventually I moved out there to teach. That's back to LA, and try to work in the film industry, and did that for a couple of years. And then I came back to Texas to finish my dissertation, to get a doctorate. Now, why did I stay? Well, what ended up happening is I came back to the college where I was teaching, and I really loved teaching there, and I really loved the community out there. I also loved something else about it. It was extremely affordable. I had a job teaching, and with that teaching job, I could afford a 4-bedroom home, brand new 4-bedroom home in a cul-de-sac. And during, my time off, I could enjoy watching Baylor football, Baylor basketball, Baylor baseball, all the Baylor sports. I could hang out with my friends in Waco, Texas, so it is a small town. But the one thing I could do is afford a really fun lifestyle that I liked. So it was just me and my dog in this place. And the taxes were low. So I had no income tax, and I had very low taxes and a good income. And it was just me and a dog. And it was great. In California, I had friends who were teaching, and their wives or husbands, in this case, would have been had jobs, both of them making over $100,000 a year, and they could not afford a house to buy. They literally could not afford to live and own property in Southern California. Now that may not be true in somewhere like Central California, but again, you have to have a job to be able, and so where you go places that are cheaper, it's because there's less demand for the property, and there's less demand for the property because there are less people out there. And where there are less people, there are usually less jobs, less industry. Okay? Usually, I'm not saying always. And so while there are places in California that are a little more affordable, they're not the California you see on TV, the beaches and the beautiful weather. Southern California is Southern California for a reason. And so it's just a highly densely populated area with lots of traffic, lots of people, and lots of demand for property. And when you get demand for property and demand for jobs, you get lower wages and you get a higher property value, which makes it really hard to live. So that was a big draw for me, and I think that's a big draw for the people coming to Texas. Okay? So if you two ever decide where to live, you may, when it comes time to pay, taxes, buy a house, you'll ask yourself, where can I afford to live? And where can I afford to live nicely? I've also lived in Hawaii. And Texas has turned out to be a great place to live. No, it doesn't have the mountains, that's for sure. But I can go down to Galveston, get to the beach, which, by the way, I lived in Burbank, Studio City, La Mirada. I was not close to the beach to begin with, and to get to the beach, any beach that I would have wanted to go to, would take me about as long as it would take me to get to Galveston. How far is it from your place, the beach, if you were to go? And to what beach?
There's a lot.
I know there's a lot. There's a whole coast. What's the closest beach to your place?
Well,
did you go to the beach much?
there's a beach by my high school,
Mm-hmm.
like 15 minutes away.
15? That's not bad. That's not bad at all. For me, it was a lot farther. It'd take 45 minutes, and that's dependent on traffic. Okay. It's usually with traffic. It's usually because of traffic that it takes that long.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about what makes Texas Texas besides the land. Originally, Texas was not, part of the United States. It was part of, New Spain. Okay. Now, with that, with the Napoleonic Wars came a revolution, a Mexican Revolutionary War, a war for independence, that is. And Mexico had declared its independence from Spain, a European power. That's why Mexico speaks what language?
Spanish.
That's correct. It's pretty obvious. And so once they got their independence, Texas is part of Mexico. Okay? Now, we would have been originally the Tejas, Tejas. Okay? Now, Texas was very sparsely populated. There were not a lot of people here. And so the Mexican government wanted more people. So they had these guys, the empresarios, bring in people, try to get people to live here. And, they would promise them land and stuff like that. Stephen F. Austin is a famous empresario. Has anybody heard of Stephen F. Austin in this class? You should, but if not, it's understandable. If you're from Texas, everybody here has heard of him. Okay, we have a school out here, Stephen F. Austin University. Well, they were bringing in people, and originally you had the Mexican nationals, right? Mexican is not a race, it is a nationality. Did you catch that? You say, somebody, what's your race? And they say, I'm Mexican. No, you're Hispanic. Okay? But your nationality is Mexican if you are a Mexican national. That is, you're a citizen of Mexico. Well, so there are people coming from America to live in Texas, Tejas, which is a Mexican territory, part of Mexico. And they call them, you have two types of people. You have the people who were the locals, those who had already lived here, called the Tejanos. The Tejanos were the native people who lived in Texas, who originally lived here. Okay? Does that make sense to you? You had the Texians, who were the people, the transplants from America who came here. People who moved from one place to another to stay. Okay? These guys who decided to come from America to live, to get land, because, you get land grants, you get free land from the government. Who doesn't want that, right? If you move here, we will give you land to live on and to use to ranch, to farm, right? To do with what you will, okay? You'll probably owe us some national taxes, of course, because they want people there. And why would they want people there? Obviously, if they're not going to get anything from them. So they make offers for the people to have land, ownership of the land if they come from, America. And they did. And so a lot of people did come from America. And as time went on, the people who came from America tended to identify with the American way more than the Mexican way, so to speak. And there was tension between the Texians and the Mexican government. And there's going to be an eventual desire for an independent independent Texas. In either one of two things. They either want to merge with the United States and be annexed as a state, or they're going to want their own independence. And you're going to find that Texas is going to have a little history of that, their own independence, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But once Texas does, become its own republic and eventually a state, we're going to talk about how this state and republic was ruled, and that's primarily what we're going to talk a little bit about right now, and we'll talk a little bit more about the history as time goes on, maybe not today. But I do want to talk about the Texas Constitution. What is a constitution, guys? Whether it be the U.S. Constitution or the Texas Constitution or the California Constitution, what is a constitution? It's basically a set of rules. It's the rules of the game that the government follows. Okay? Laws, it determines how laws are made for certain. How's that? And it contains basically the basic structure in written form of how the government is set up. It tells you how the government is set up, how the government is run, the rules of how the government is set up, and the limitations and its duties. It talks about what it's supposed to do, what it's not supposed to do. We got, in certain cases like the U.S. Constitution, you got checks and balances, how one branch of government will check the other. Talks about the divisions of government, who gets what power and who gets the other powers, and what powers do you not get, okay? Talks a little bit about rights. These things, constitutions, in the U.S. Constitution, we have the U.S. Bill of Rights, and in the Texas Constitution, we'll have bills of rights as well, a Bill of Rights. But there will be differences, and there's going to be some similarities. We're going to talk a little bit about those. We'll go down a list, see how far we can get before we can get on out of here. All right. One little factoid about the U.S. Constitution versus the Texas Constitution. You could say it one way or the other. The U.S. Constitution is much shorter than the Texas Constitution. Or you could say the Texas Constitution is much larger than the U.S. Constitution. They both mean the same thing. There's a relation. One is bigger, one's smaller. And there's probably a reason for that, okay? There's an amendment process that involves with the Texas. So here's a difference between the Texas and the U.S., okay? Whereas the U.S. Constitution, the amendment process does not ask the citizens directly if they will accept a proposed amendment. So imagine a proposed amendment of the Constitution. Can you... I think there are several people who would like to amend the Constitution right now. Imagine saying, let's amend the Constitution, and we're going to repeal the Second Amendment and the 28th Amendment, which suggests that no citizen may carry or bear firearms. Okay? And then imagine that gets through 2/3 of the House and the Senate, right? Do you think they're going to ask the citizenry what they think about it? There's about 270 million guns out in America right now. Right? You think if you ask the U.S. citizenry if they wanted to give up their guns, would they say, yeah, let's do that? No, they probably would not. U.S. Constitution doesn't ask the people what they think about amending the Constitution. That's the difference between the Constitution of Texas and the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution doesn't do that, whereas the Texas Constitution does. The U.S. Constitution has 27 amendments. Is that a lot of amendments? An amendment is a change, right? That sounds like a lot. The Texas Constitution has 507.
Wait, what?
Yes. Now, why would you change the Constitution? Now, not all the amendments to the Constitution have to do with rights. Sometimes you amend the Constitution in light of changing society, changing situations, realizing that the government is not working as smoothly as it ought to be working, okay? That, you go, okay, this Constitution doesn't work, therefore we ought to alter it rather than abolish it. And so you make an amendment to alter the Constitution. And so the Texas state Constitution has gone through a process of amending itself, where the people amend it, so that they can create a better acting government. Not just more just, but just better at functioning. Okay? If your car wasn't functioning perfectly, what do? You alter it. And if you kept a list of it, you'd have a certain number of alterations to it. And so with the Texas, so not all of these are earth-shattering, and not all of them are, necessarily civil rights issues, which that often think of that in terms of bills of rights. All right. The function of the Texas Constitution. Now I'm going to give you 5 functions of it. Okay? All testable, of course. Okay? 1, to justify and explain the political institutions. To justify the political institutions, to suggest we have a certain type of government here, and these institutions are made, and these are their functions, and this is why they function. 2, to delegate power, to say this area has this power to do such, and this area group has the power to do such and such. So we break it into 3 groups, and we have the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the executive branch. And so you will see that the 3 branches of government, again, are established in the Texas Constitution, much like they are in the U.S. Constitution. And this is going to be important to us as we talk about the similarities and differences in relation to the U.S. Constitution. 3, they establish local governments. Okay? It establishes local governments. So there are more than one government. There's a federal, state, and now the Texas government is establishing these governments, not the U.S. government. Provides checks and balances and prevents the concentration of political power. Again, it tells what branches have, how they can check. For example, the judicial branch could check the legislative branch. The executive branch can check the legislative branch. And we're going to talk about that and the different types of vetoes that the governor has, similar to but different than the President of the United States. And defines, this is number 5, defines the limits of political power. And that's important. That's very important, that a constitution defines the limits of political power. Why is that important?
To protect our rights.
To protect our rights. To protect from tyranny. And obviously, if your rights are being violated by the government, that is called tyranny, correct? Texans are the history of Texas is one of independence and of a very independent people. And the people of Texas traditionally and historically have been very wary of government. All right? Very wary of government intrusion. Very wary of government telling you what to do. How many of you like the government telling you what to do? So there's been a lot of issues with the police department in the news lately with excessive force, right? Now, whether each individual instance of force is bad is debatable. You got to take each one, right? But here's the fact: what is the branch of government that the police represent?
Executive?
Yes. And here's one of the issues going on here. Laws such as having to do with drug possession. Okay? Now, I personally think those who do drugs are really mentally hurting themselves, right? And when you do drugs, you're also keeping in power a very vicious group of people who sell drugs and who are willing to kill people in doing so, like the cartels. All right? So there's a whole industry that is very evil, that provides otherwise, I don't want to call them innocent, but non-vile people, okay? They'll associate themselves with those people, the ones who say want to smoke pot still, even if their local dealer is a nice guy, unless it's legalized in the States. But like if you're doing it in Texas where it isn't, you still have to get it through drug runners. Your drug dealer has to get it from somebody, and that somebody goes up the chain of command all the way to people who would really kill people. Okay? But for the daily pot smoker, police comes around and says, look, I see that you got some marijuana. Marijuana is illegal. I'm going to arrest you.
Do you think the legalization of marijuana could cause more people to consume it?
Cause more people to what?
To use it or something?
Yes, of course.
I mean, doesn't that bring...
It doesn't stop people. The making marijuana illegal clearly didn't stop people from using it, though, did it?
It didn't.
And it did cause a whole black market that operates under the legal market, right, to exist. Which, like I said, any market requires enforcement. Okay, and if it's an illegal market, a black market, then their enforcement is usually through guns and stuff like that. Okay, they kill people, right? Violence. And so you cross a drug dealer, he's got to enforce his own regulations. And how does he do it? Through pain. He's not going to put you in jail. There's no underground jail, so to speak. It's called just being underground. They kill you. And so, point being is you get a clash with the executive branch of government when there are laws that people don't like. And so you go, certain laws are causing people to be arrested. We don't like that. And how do you change that? I mean, and certain state legislators have decided, we're going to get rid of this problem by just making marijuana legal in our state. Okay? And so you can see state governments will do that. But the idea here is to limit the power of the government with our state constitution in such a way as you go, these are the things you cannot do. Okay? And clearly in the great state of Texas, you can make pot illegal or other drugs illegal. But the goal here is to avoid the abuse of government. All right? Now, some would believe that, these I call them over, I'm not calling them overreaching. These laws to prevent drug use are a step against one's liberty. Okay? So what if they are? Well, then you have a way to amend it, okay? So that we can maximize our liberty, because we want to defend against government overreach. And we want to limit the government's ability to make laws that are arbitrary. What do I mean by arbitrary?
Nonsense.
Just almost meaningless laws that really have no value, right? Now, some would say laws against smoking marijuana are arbitrary. It violates my liberty, and some would, and then you could argue that it really does, it hurts the public more than it helps it. It puts people in jail who are, otherwise peaceful citizens, right? It creates criminals where there need not be criminals. Your everyday pot smoker. Somebody just goes home and smokes pot and veges out and watches TV, SpongeBob SquarePants all day, and then, and that's their choice, right? After all, people drink, don't they? Now, of course, you can go, well, yeah, and look at the results of that. There are thousands of people that die every year from drunk drivers, okay? All right, granted. And there's domestic violence, okay, granted. Then people go, well, does all that happen with pot? I don't know, I haven't seen the data. Okay, now, so you go, well, okay, the Texas Constitution might, in it, has a way to limit the government with the kind of laws it can make or the kind of duties or things it can impose on the citizens. Apparently, that's not one of them. However, it can also give the power to change and amend, right? And make laws. All right, so it's very valuable in order to preserve the liberty of its citizens, because the Texans, if I were to ask a test question, were very weary of political power, of governmental power over the rights of the citizens. They liked their freedom. All right. Texas and the U.S. Constitution. The two constitutions are similar. All right. One, they're both by the people. In the preamble, which I think I brought, which ironically is the last page of this. Oh, and by the way, this is not the Texas Constitution. This is the Texas Bill of Rights, okay, which is pretty long. The Texas Constitution is huge. The preamble is short. It says, humbly invoking the blessings of Almighty God, the people of the state of Texas do ordain and establish this Constitution. Who establishes and ordains it? The people of Texas do, right? Of the state of Texas. And they invoke the blessings of Almighty God, okay? In a way, it's a religious document already. It's by the people. In this Constitution, they, like the U.S. Constitution, have a separation of powers. They break up the branches and establish that each branch has its own powers to which they are limited in exercising, okay? 3, there are checks and balances, okay? You could, each branch checks the other one. I want to make sure this thing's still going. I heard something sound like a phone call.
Yeah.
Good. I'm still going. 3, the goal is the prevention of tyranny through this. And that's 4, actually. And 5, establishes federalism. I know that sounds weird because when we think of federalism, we think of the United States federal government, right? The U.S. federal government, and then you have the state governments, and you have the local governments. What is federalism again? It is the division of power by the creation of smaller governments. So you have larger and smaller governments that work in cooperation with one another in order to get the tasks done of governing, I guess, the people, right? So we have the federal government, but then we have the state governments. And in the state governments, we have the counties. And in the counties, we have the cities. And in the cities, there are even smaller governments. Like, for example, right now, what is being hotly contested in my neighborhood is who's going to be the Board of Education. Okay? It can be very hotly contested. Why? Well, because those are the guys who are going to teach our kids And what do I want being taught to my kids? Do I want a bunch of garbage being taught to my kids? No. That actually has more to do with me than whether or not we put sanctions on, say, Vladimir Putin in Russia. Okay? What my kid learns in school. Whether that determines what he will be when he or she grows up. Okay? Their occupation. Whether or not they go to a good school, college or not. Okay? There have been 7 Texas constitutions. How many United States constitutions have there been?
2.
Good for answering it that way. What are they called?
The Articles of Confederation.
Yes.
The Constitution.
That's it. Articles of Confederation. Thank you. And there have been 7 constitutions of the United States. 1 is the Constitution which was under Mexican control. 2, as an independent republic. 3, as a member of the Confederacy. If you'll recall, there was a civil war in America. 4 of them, this is not just 4, there have been 4 others as a U.S. state. So there have been 4 changes in our constitutions since Texas was made a state, okay? With that being said, Texas was part of Mexico. Texas was a republic. Texas seceded from the Union to become part of the Confederacy, which would have made them an independent state in union with the Confederate States, right? And now Texas has been annexed again as a state. Some people believe that Texas could and should secede from the Union and become its own republic again. California has put on the ballot recently, in the recent years, this thing called Calexit. Do you know what that is? Calexit is California's desire to secede from the Union, to leave the United States of America, and become its own country. Do you support that?
No.
Why?
No.
It's dumb. Why is it dumb? Is it because California has more to gain as a United State than its own country?
I don't even know how that would work.
Well, they'd create their own constitution. There's already a California constitution, and that would just run the local governments. They'd probably have to create a military for their common defense, right? They could establish foreign treaties, coin their own money, right? Do all the things that a federal government does. A national government, I should say. That's what they would do, right? And then the rest of the United States would go along without them. Now, of course, what would the rest of the United States, what would we gain from California not being there? Well, there'd be a change in power, political power, because you'd lose 56, the Democrats would lose 56 electoral votes, which would very much tip the favor to make America a much more conservative nation, okay, nationally. There's a lot of money that the rest of America pays to California because they, because of, you know, the debts California runs, okay? There's been a lot of bailouts lately, okay? On the other hand, California, what does California add to America? They have ports. They are part of the United States. They have a huge, they're, I think, the 5th, if they were their own nation, they'd be the 5th largest economy in the world. So, I mean, there's a relationship there, but I mean, are Californians different than Texans? Right. And so you go, well, why should we be the same country? We're so different, right? And that's how Californians feel. Well, the same thing is felt here in Texas. A lot of Texans are just like, look, we don't like the way the United States is going. We don't like California, their politics. We like the people, but we don't like their politics. We don't like New York's politics. We don't like DC's politics. We don't like, Minnesota's politics. Why should we be part of a group of people with whom we disagree so fundamentally? Right? After all, why should DC be making choices for us here? Texas is a big place with a lot of people. Why don't we just take our ball and go home, as they say? Well, there's a debate whether or not we can do it. Some say, well, legally you can't do it. Others say, legally we can do it. I tell you, it doesn't matter if it's legal or illegal. If you look at the original Revolutionary War between America and Britain, our Declaration of Independence was clearly illegal. We had no written legal right to leave, Britain's rule, the rule of England. But we did, and we said, guess what? We're leaving. And if you try to stop us, well, we'll have to fight about it. Okay? And we did. We fought for independence. Same thing was true with the War of Independence for Mexico. All right? Same thing was true for Texas independence. It can happen. Make no doubt about it. You start to take people's guns away, like we were just discussing. Do you think that people in Texas are going to want to stay in the Union?
No.
I don't think so. I think Texans like guns. Okay? That even includes the Democrats. Okay? So there are many reasons why Texas may or may not declare independence. The same thing is true, like I said, with California. California was so fed up during the Trump years that they were like, we got to get out of here. They were especially worried that Trump was going to be reelected. Now, of course, maybe the Collexit movement has quieted down since Trump is no longer in office. But guess what, folks? That's just 4 more years away. Donald Trump's going to run again. Boy.
Are you sure?
Well, I'm not. Yeah, he could be killed between now and then. I can't be sure of anything. I can't be sure that I'm going to make it out of this class alive. But one thing is for certain, he said he is very seriously considering running for president again, but he can't say so specifically for legal reasons, because there's legal things you'd have to go through by declaring you're running for presidency. Once you say, I'm declaring that I'm running for president, what does that mean? You have to fill out paperwork. You have to pay. Okay? So he's going to wait. It doesn't matter. Pretend he's going to run. Okay? Do you think Californians and New Yorkers are going to like that? No. What happens if, what happened would happen, Think of it that way. Just, what happens if the United States broke up? What would happen to the U.S. and Texas constitutions? Our Texas Constitution would take over, and we'd probably have to amend it to provide for our common defense. We'd probably have to amend it so that we could coin money. We'd probably have to amend it so that we could do what? Make treaties with other governments. Because this Constitution doesn't provide for those things. Those are things that independent nations do. So we allow our federal Constitution to take on those duties. Same thing with California. Okay? Let's see. Talked a little bit about the Texas founding already. Catholicism originally was in Mexico. That was, they had a state church. Okay? And what happens there? Well, Texas, and the American founding was highly anti-Catholic. Okay? There are a lot of Catholics where you're from?
Congo.
Yeah. There are a lot of Catholics there?
No.
Yeah. Who originally settled in the Congo?
I think the Bantu people. Or was that from Belgium?
Europeans.
It was colonized by the Belgians. But the people who were there first were the Bantu people. Like the very short people.
Okay, what about are there European settlers there?
No.
How did you learn English? Do people speak English in the Congo?
No.
Not at all.
No.
How did you learn English?
I was living in Malawi at first, before coming here.
Malawi?
Yeah.
Who settled that? And I could guess.
The English.
Yes. Can you hear his English, British style accent? Underneath the, it's very British. But it's good, it's good. So England would have brought its own religious beliefs. Well, if you go to Mexico, Spain brought theirs, and the national religion of Spain was what? Catholicism, yeah. All right, so that was originally it. Let's see. Now I've covered that all I want to do. One of the things in the Texas Bill of Rights I want you to know though, is one of the very specific things already written in Section 4 of Article 1 of the Bill of Rights. It says, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust in this state, nor shall anyone be excluded from holding office on account of his religious sentiments, provided, listen to this, provided he acknowledge the existence of a supreme being. That literally an atheist is disqualified from Texas office. All right? Witnesses are not disqualified by religious beliefs. Obviously, if you are a witness to something, you need to be a witness. Freedom of worship. Let's see. Very specific. I want you to notice the difference between the Texas Bill of Rights on religion and the U.S. Bill of Rights on religion. What does the U.S. Bill of Rights on religion say? It says Congress shall pass no laws, right, regarding the establishment or the free exercise, establishment of religion or the free exercise thereof. And then it goes on to the other aspects, but not religion, okay? Like press and speech, okay? Very, very brief, very vague. There are several, so if I were to ask you the difference between the Bill of Rights, the Texas Bill of Rights versus the U.S. Bill of Rights, you would tell me that they are much more explicit and specific in their discussion of things such as religious freedom and free speech, stuff like that. Okay, I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to end on it, okay? Freedom of worship. All men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences. No man shall be compelled to attend, erect, or support any place of worship or to maintain any ministry against his consent. No human authority ought, in any case whatever, to control or interfere with the rights of conscience in matters of religion, and no preference shall be ever given by law to any religious society or mode of worship. But it shall be the duty of the legislature to pass such laws as may be necessary to protect equally every religious denomination in the peaceable enjoyment of its own mode of public worship. No money shall be appropriated or drawn from the treasury for the benefit of any sect or religious society, theological or religious seminary, nor shall property belonging to the state be appropriated for such purposes. So you got both the separation of church and state and the free exercise. The free exercise is the protection of the free. It tells that the government will not get in the way of your worship whatsoever. And two, money will not be given to the church, any church, from the state coffers. Okay? Specific, not vague. Did you catch that? Specific, not vague. The U.S. Constitution is very vague. The state constitution is very specific. We're going to talk much more about the Bill of Rights. I'll do my best. I'd like you guys to read through the Texas Bill of Rights, see the difference between it and the U.S. Constitution's Bill of Rights. All right? With that, I'm going to give you the rest of the day. And I think we've got very little time to begin with anyway. I think I brought you up to the end. So there we go. You're out 3 minutes early. All right?